page 2. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Taking refuge, page 3, one in English and one in Tibetan. I go for refuge to the Himalaya, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of merit through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merit through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Chodam Sangye Chodam La Janchu Vadu Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunsen Ki Personam Ki Dola Peche Sangye Doba Shu. Page 4, General Bodhicitta. To accomplish my own and others' aim, I generally mind seeking enlightenment. To accomplish my own and others' aim, I generally mind seeking enlightenment. Ragdan Chandong Tubladu, Zagi Chanchu Simkye. Page 6 for immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness and experience of suffering. May all sentient beings divide in community, free from desire for friends and hate for enemies.
So the 12 links. Get back to the 12 links. And just to repeat a couple of things that we talked about yesterday. So the 12 links are basically connected to the Four Noble Truths. There's different ways of looking at the 12 links. There's actually a description of the 12 links saying the contaminated 12 links and the contaminated version of the 12 links and the purified version of the 12 links. So as we did yesterday, as we went through all of them, saying if there is ignorance or due to ignorance, there's contaminated action. And due to contaminated action, there's the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, to number 12, aging and death. So we can see that ignorance leads to some specific result, which in turn leads to a result, which in turn leads to a result, all the way back to aging and death. So this is basically, so this is the way in which you look at ignorance, seeing as ignorance, the 12 links. It's the forward order, because you go from number 1 to number 2 to number 3, kind of seeing how one leads to the next, until number 12, aging and death. So the forward order describes the second truth, which is the truth of the origin of suffering, of the Four Noble Truths. So the cause for our suffering lies with, well, ignorance, other delusions, karma. So here this is very much stressed with saying ignorance leads to karma. karma leads to, and so forth, all the way to aging and death. And then there's the reverse order, right? The reverse order saying, well, because of aging, what does it go? I forget now. What was the reverse order? The result of aging and death was produced, yeah. So aging and death were produced by birth. Birth was produced by so-and-so. So we start with the result and describe what produced those results. So number 12 was produced by 11. 11 was produced by 10. All the way back to ignorance. So here the emphasis is on the result, which relates to the first truth, right? The truth of suffering. Okay. So the result is, suffering or problems. In other words, the results are problems. So the first truth is basically dealing with the problems, the difficulties we have in life, the symptoms that we experience now. And then that's the reverse order. And the forward order, as I just said, deals with the cause of all our problems. Yeah. So to just sum it up again, basically we experience all sorts of different problems, all sorts of different difficulties in our life, uncontrollably. And so experiencing those results, and it's not just the suffering that we identify as suffering, even the good things that happen to us in life, they're very restricted because they don't last. Yeah, whatever good there is, if I continue with the same object, it's just going to increase. First, the happiness will change into suffering. If I use the same object, if I don't change the object of my happiness, such as eating certain foods, being with certain friends, if I stay with that all the time without changing it, I'm bound to suffer. So whatever even positive situation there is, it's going to turn into something that I will dislike. And our body and minds, they're such that they have the potential for suffering to arise at any time. So this is what the reverse order of the 12 links deals with. Aging and death was produced by the previous, and all the way back to ignorance. Okay, and then if we do it the forward order, well, ignorance leads to so and so and so and so and so, leading us to aging and death. And then there's the purified version of the 12 links. The purified version being now saying it the other way around. If we get rid of ignorance, we get rid of number 2. We get rid of the contaminated karma. If we get rid of that, we get rid of the next, and the next, and the next. And eventually we are able to get rid of the last link, which is aging and death, or the uncontrolled kind of aging and death that we experience now. Okay, so this is again dealing with the Four Noble Truth. It deals with the last truth, the path, right? Because if you want to get rid of suffering, if you want to get rid of problems and the causes of problems, we need to get at the root, and that is ignorance. Ignorance is the root of all our problems. And so if we seize those, we get rid of all the links that follow. That's the truth of the path. And the truth of the cessation is the reverse order of this purified version of the 12 links. So instead of going clockwise, we go anti-clockwise. In the sense we start with number 12. Number 12 is seized because we got rid of the one previous. And then the previous one is seized or is eliminated because we got rid of, all the way ignorance. So 12 is gone because of 11. 11 is gone because of 10. 10 is gone because of 9. And then so forth until the contaminated karma is gone now because there's no ignorance. That's the cessation. So we've emphasized the absence of the result, the absence of the suffering, the aging and death. That we've emphasized by starting with that and saying we get rid of that because eventually we get back of ignorance. So it's just two ways of talking about the 12 links, right? One clockwise, one anti-clockwise. Okay, so that's important to understand, just to see how the 12 links are connected to the Four Noble Truth.
Which truth is it?
The cessation is the third truth, the truth of cessation. Cessation means, so there's the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause, origin, and then the truth of the cessation.
The truth of what can be done.
the truth of what can be done is the truth of the path. So it's a bit like with the disease that I talked about yesterday. So kind of the Buddha is saying, well, let's take it as like a disease. Well, we all have a headache, which is like we all suffer, we all have problems. The cause of that is the high blood pressure, okay, or the ignorance. And then he's saying, good news, there's a cure, right? He's kind of saying, number 3, oh, there's a cure for that. Because there's a cause, you can get rid of the cause. So there's the absence of headache, there's the absence of high blood pressure. Because, number 4, there's a remedy, there's a medicine. Okay. So likewise, the Four Noble Truths work the same way. Okay. All right. So, and now we're looking at the actual 12 links. So as I said yesterday, we have a tendency of just thinking of this lifetime. We're so accustomed to that. We're so familiar with just thinking of this lifetime, even though we believe in past and future lives. But it's just a belief. Temporarily, it is a belief. It can only be a belief. So, the Buddha himself has said, whatever I teach, you must investigate. You cannot accept, you cannot take on faith. Which seems to contradict what I just said. You know, past and future lives, at this point, you have to take on faith. But if we're very, very honest in our day-to-day life, we may be scientists, we may be, you know, highly educated and so forth. Most of what we say, we know. We actually take on faith. I mean, the classic example is the day we were born. When were you born? July. What day?
30s.
30th of July. Oh, that's one day.
69, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so she was born on 30th of July. Do you know? Or do you have faith? You have faith. She doesn't know. Really? I mean, how does she know? She doesn't remember. She was, you know, as a child, you know, you don't know, you know, you can't look at the date and so forth. So it's really your parents tell you, and you say you know you were born on that day. And they have no reason to lie to you. So you trust it, you believe it, but you don't know 100% when you were born. Something as basic as that. And then so many things we say we know because we read it somewhere, right? We read, you know, coffee is good for us, coffee is bad for us, sugar is good for us, sugar is bad for us, right? And sometimes we know sugar is good for us, and other times we know it's bad for us. So it kind of keeps changing, right? And the better the article, the more convinced we are. But it's just faith. Unless we are scientists and we actually do the experiments ourselves and see the negative results, let's say, of sugar, we don't know. Yeah? Saying the globe is round, our earth is round. I don't know. I believe it. You know, don't show me a picture of a globe. I mean, you could do anything with photography. So a photograph doesn't, you know, I mean, you could make anything happen with a photograph. You can have me have horns on my head, yeah, on the photograph. So, I haven't been to the moon. I'm not a scientist who can actually prove to herself that the moon, the earth is round. But I take it on faith. Because scientists have said so, and they have good reasons, and even though I haven't really understood the connection between the reason and the fact, I, you know, have no reason to distrust them. So the same is true for a lot of the facts in Buddhism. We take things on faith, but it's not blind faith, it's faith based on reasoning. Why? Because there's certain things that the Buddha tells us that we can understand firsthand. And then we come to see, well, they had no reason to lie to us. Just as our parents, you know, there's certain things we cannot know firsthand. Our parents tell us about it, but we know our parents are truthful. You know, they have no reason to lie to us. So therefore, you know, we take it on faith that we were born on July 30th. So, but with Buddhist faith, when we say have faith, it is not said to be a lasting faith. It's called a temporary faith. So we should, you know, first we come to some understanding about the truth of suffering and so forth, and this we know firsthand, right? We don't need to have faith that, you know, that our happiness doesn't last, our suffering, you know, is definitely there, very vivid. I mean, no one needs to tell us that. I mean, well, needs to remind us, and then we see it, and we know firsthand that this is the case. Okay. So then the Buddha tells us about past and future lives, and they make sense. And scientists haven't disproven the existence of past and future life. I mean, no way. No, I mean, they haven't proved the existence of the non-existence. So we're pretty much in the middle there. It's possible, maybe not. We don't know. But we can take it on faith, temporarily, until we ourselves come to a direct understanding. So if it's difficult for us to have an understanding of past and future life, then often I ask people, well, what if it was past and future lives? And just think of it along those terms. Yeah. And then if you have already, you know, a good conviction or a faith in that, well, it's kind of easier to start from there. But honestly, even myself, I've done it for so long, and whenever I hear something about, you know, there's a movie called The Boy Who Remembered His Past or something. It's like a documentary, very good documentary. And it talks about this professor in the US who actually investigates those cases where children claim they remember their past lives. I'm actually going to leave it here with the Dharma friends if people want to see it. It's very interesting. It's very scientific. It's not like, you know, Larifari kind of religious, right? It's just very matter of fact. And he said every year there's about 2,500 children who claim they remember their past lives. And some of those accounts are like, wow, how could they know what they claim they know? Yeah. Anyway, if you see it, maybe it's convincing. Anyway, but the point is that when I see this, every time I go, whoa, maybe there's body. You know, like I'm really, I love watching those movies because it shows I'm not 100% convinced. Right? I mean, like, I don't need to watch a movie about the sun rising in the east because, you know, I believe that. No documentary is kind of boring, I know that. So I watch documentary about things that I don't know, and then, woo, right? But it makes a lot of sense. A lot of things make a lot of sense. And so here, it talks about how one action in this lifetime can have an effect on the future. And that explains why bad things happen to good people. And good things happen to bad people. I mean, if there's anything like that. Really good people, really bad people, I mean. But you know, there are some people that we would consider very cruel and then they win the lottery. How's that possible? Right? And then these wonderful, wonderful, beautiful people always work for others. And they get sick. Right? So here, we have an explanation how yes, we may be wonderful, wonderful people, but there's still one mind that gives us a lot of trouble. And under the control of which we do things, which we don't mean, you know, we don't mean to do harmful things, but they harm us, harm others, and therefore harm us. Yeah. And how these results can ripen many, many lifetimes afterwards. Yeah. And if you, I mean, for me, it's always very helpful just to get a bit of an idea. What was the kind of karma I've accumulated? I sometimes read historical books, and not in much detail, you know, because it gets kind of boring, some of it, but some of it is kind of interesting. And I was given a magazine back home by my family, of some National Geographic, about the history of Germany. Ooh, it's pretty dark there. In the 15th century, it was just weird Germans running through the forests with, you know, Israel was a high culture, and Germans were like somewhere in the forest. But I'm thinking, I could have been, at that time, I could have been one of those people, you know, running through the forest. There's someone I don't like, slaughter them. I mean, that was just the way of life then. Yeah, killing to survive. I mean, it was just, you know, that time. And I was, you know, if there's past lives, I was there somewhere. Maybe I was an earthworm, so not that much slaughtering going on. Maybe I was a dog, so again, not that. But I could have been, you know, a human being, a soldier, and being ordered by the government to kill. So I have accumulated karma of killing. I don't know about it, but it's there. It doesn't get lost. So then, if I suddenly, you know, something's happened to me, I don't feel like, oh my God, how could this happen to me? It's like, I've done something in the past, there's a cause for it. And explains things. It does explain certain things. And the good things too, you know, good things happen to me, good experiences that I have. Well, there's somewhere in the past, things that I've done, you know, good and bad, both. So it explains a lot, and also it's very helpful in understanding how important it is to be careful with karma. I mean, kind of when we start studying Buddhism, when we start getting involved with the ideas, the Buddhist ideas, most people kind of, oh, karma, I understood, move on very quickly. And when Atisha, the great Atisha, was asked to come to Tibet, in Tibet there was already a lot of Buddhist, incredibly profound Buddhist teachings were available in Tibet. And Tantra had become very famous and very, everyone wanted to just practice Tantra. Like nowadays, a lot of people, when this homeless gives an initiation, it's full. This homeless gives a teaching, not that full. So Westerners and Tibetans alike, Tantra, it's the fastest, it's the best, everyone wants to do that. But without a good understanding of karma, it just becomes like this homeless says it, like a cult. It doesn't mean much, it's just movements and rituals, but if you're internally not ready, it doesn't really help that much. And so when Atisha was living in India, great Atisha, some Tibetans understood that there was too much emphasis on Tantra, too much emphasis on the high practices. And then they requested Atisha to come to Tibet. And the person who requested him said, don't give us any profound teachings. Give us a teaching on karma. And Atisha was so pleased. And he said, well, actually, the teachings on karma are so profound. But nevertheless, I'm so happy that you request this because that's the foundation. Without a good understanding of that, everything else, it's like building a house on water without a foundation, or on quicksand without a foundation. And so he's known also as the Lama of Karma, the Karma Lama. Is another name that people gave to him, because he talked so much about the law of cause and effect. So as we heard last night, we talked already about cause and effect, how intricate it actually is, how complicated. Every part of our body has a cause in the past. And so the Buddha, of course, said, well, don't think about it too much. You're just going to give yourself a headache. If you think about all the little nitty-gritty details, why do I have exactly that feeling right now? What is the exact cause in the past? I mean, if you look at, on the molecular level at quantum physics, for example, where does this exactly come from? What is it? Why is it positioned here? I mean, there's so many causes and conditions kind of bringing that particular molecule in its position. So that would just give us a headache. If we roughly know how it works, we're okay. So with karma, it's the same. To know exactly what is the exact cause for this exact suffering, I mean, gives us a headache. But to understand that suffering can only come from harmful actions, and that happiness can only come from actions of benefiting others and therefore ourselves, that's great. Yeah. And understanding that this is the case in every situation. It's not like karma works the day when I want it to work, but not when I don't want it to work, right? If I kind of, think a thought and I really follow my anger and I'm thinking, maybe that won't have a consequence. No way around it. So to always be careful. So if we do any kind of high practice, but we're not careful every moment of the day, we're not mindful every moment of the day, we're trying to build a palace on quicksand. So this is why this is so important. And to consider past lives. To not just think of this lifetime, because it's so insignificant. And we do everything when we really honestly ask ourselves what we're doing with this lifetime. What are our worries? If we considered future lives, if we really thought about, well, maybe tomorrow, who knows, my future life starts, then many of the things we worry about now, we won't worry about. How could we? Yeah. So really, a lot of our worry comes from just seeing this lifetime. This is so important. If you really reflect, when you're in meditation, when you're on your own, wherever you have time to reflect upon your worries. And then see, are they really because I'm just so much focused on this lifetime? Even if we live to the age of 70 or 80, are the things we are so concerned about really that important? If there's thousands of lifetimes to follow, right? Anyway, so this is something, it just makes our life easier. I mean, forget about realizing the ultimate nature of phenomena. Yeah, that'd be best. But we all know it's not easy to realize that. So if we just thought of, a little bit vaster, kind of, what is going to come in the future lives, we'd be so much more relaxed. Okay. Getting back to this understanding of the 12 links then, so with the 12 links, in this order, so there's different orders. And I said to you yesterday, don't expect something neat and clean and symmetric. It's a little chaotic at times. So are our lives. And I tried to explain it to you in the clearest way possible so that you get some understanding. But the point is really there's a certain way, if you talk about the 12 in this order, and there's other orders, as I said, and I'll explain it to you, but in this order, it's explained from the point of view of 3 lifetimes. Lifetime number 1, something happens. Something happens. We accumulate some action out of ignorance, which then does not get lost. That's important, because then we move to lifetime number 2, and whatever we've accumulated, the imprint or the seed of that, there's some residue of that action, that is left, and it stays throughout lifetime number 2. And only at the very end of lifetime number 2, something happens with that karmic seed, so that it ripens into lifetime number 3. Yeah. It could happen also, first lifetime something happens, and next lifetime right away it ripens. It could actually also, something could ripen in this lifetime too. But here we're talking about specific karma, and explain exactly what this means. What is the specific karma we're talking about that ripens either in the next lifetime or any lifetime after that? Karma to be very careful about. Anyway, this much for this explanation just now, because then I want to go into ignorance. What is ignorance? But basically, so to get this understanding, these 12 links, it's a specific way of looking at a karma, ignorance leading to a karma, and this karma not getting lost. First lifetime it's accumulated, second lifetime it just lies there dormant, doesn't get lost. Until just before we die, it ripens. And then, third lifetime is determined by that specific karma. Okay. Alright, so that's it. But then there's another way, and it'll be clear, just if you understand this for now. There's another way in changing the order of the 12 links. We don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, very neatly, but you can rearrange them. So you have the same process. You do something in this lifetime, just before death, that karmic seed ripens, and in your next lifetime, you experience it, big time. Okay. So, but let's just nicely start. It'll be like this, like with the 12 links, you'll be still in the dark until I've gone through all of them. And then you have like a rough picture of all of them, and then you get like, so this is what she meant. And I repeat what I said. Yeah, but just kind of keep it in the back of your mind. Okay, the first, as I said, is ignorance. Now I use the word ignorance all the time, but basically it's not a good word. I use it because, 12 things, number 1 is called ignorance. It's not a good word. I don't think it's a good translation. But, that's what we have, and we may as well get used to it. But ignorance in Tibetan actually means ma-rikpa. It's like the R in Tibetan is pronounced in a funny way, but it's actually M-A-R-I-K-P-A. M-A-R-I-K-P-A. Ma-rikpa. Right? Ma is just a negation. Rikpa means awareness. So it's non-awareness or unawareness. Because ignorance, the term ignorance, has a bit of the connotation of being stupid. But I'm not saying any of us are stupid. Many of us have, many of you may have, you may be very highly educated, know a lot about, have great general knowledge or great specific knowledge. So here, we're not saying anyone is ignorant and stupid. We're just saying of all the different states of mind that we have, there's so many different minds we have. Yeah? There's our 5 sense consciousnesses, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness, tongue consciousness. So these 5. So these 5, there's not much ignorance there. So it's really the mental consciousness. Yeah, the consciousness that is neither of the 5 senses. It's really the mental consciousness. This is where the problem lies. So it's actually ironic, because the mental consciousness, that's the one that meditates. It's also the one we need to develop. So when we meditate, we use the mental consciousness. We don't meditate with our eye consciousness. Yeah, we don't go, no, we try to shut down our sense consciousnesses. Yeah. Our eye consciousness can only see shape and color. Our ear consciousness can only perceive sound. Nose only smell. Tongue consciousness only taste. And then our body consciousness can only perceive tangible objects. Okay. So those 5 sense consciousnesses are very helpful, but whatever information they receive is being moved on to the mental consciousness, and then we start reflecting on, And we start, forming our world with the mental consciousness, who we are, through the information we get from the outside world. But the mental consciousness is the one that is really to be paid attention to. It's the one we develop, we transform when we meditate, for example. And our mental consciousness, when that is transformed, as a side effect, the other consciousnesses are transformed too. Yeah, but we don't focus on it. So, the mental consciousness, very, very precious mind, very precious awareness. And there's different mental consciousnesses that can arise. So many different ones. But in nature, consciousness is very valuable. It's something very unique that we possess. The ability to know things, to perceive things. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing property that we have, or amazing thing that we have there. There's only one problem with our mental consciousness. That somehow there's one mind that is called unawareness. There's a mind that does not perceive reality as it is. It's just actually just one mind that is said to be not in the nature of mind. So it's almost like you have a crystal clear, you have like a very clear crystal. The nature is of being clear and being able to reflect things, so you can look through it. But it can temporarily be kind of dusty or dirty. Yeah. So as long as you have the dust and the dirt, you can't really use the crystal, in its greatest potential, with its fullest potential. But we know it's not in the nature of the crystal, it's just a matter of wiping off the dust. So likewise, our minds are like that. They actually have amazing ability. And sometimes it comes through. I mean, the power of mind, you're all familiar with that. Yeah, the power of mind, we can do all sorts of amazing things with our minds. Most of the times, we're limited by that unawareness, by that not knowing. And what is this unawareness actually? It is unawareness, and it's another word that is, it almost seems like there's some passive, just not knowing. But there's more than that. Ignorance or unawareness, or marikpa in Tibetan, refers to a mind that actively misapprehends reality. It actively misapprehends how I and everything else exists. So in other words, all phenomena, they seem to exist in a way which is actually totally impossible. So there's a mind that perceives such. This mind is not always active. Sometimes it's there very actively. Sometimes it lies dormant. But even when it lies dormant, it is so deeply entrenched, so deeply habitual, it's so much part of us, that it has an influence on everything we do right now. To a degree that having had that mind for so long, it's said to leave imprints, like residues. It's like every moment it leaves imprints. And these imprints, what they do to us is that every mind that is not that ignorance, a different mind, whatever appears to it, appears in that wrong way. So there's two facets to a mind. Something can appear to a mind passively, and a mind can actively apprehend that. Yeah. So let me give you the mirror image, the image of a mirror. When you look into your, in the mirror, what appears to you passively is your face. But actively, you know it's not your face. Yeah? If you got some hummus left on your nose, you're not going to wipe the picture, you're going to wipe here. So even though it appears to be your face, we're not deceived by that. We know, we don't apprehend it to be really our face. Okay? But with this wrong appearance, it's a bit like with the mirror image. So phenomena appear in an impossible way, but we also hold them to be that way. Okay? So, there's two things we need to break through if we want to get rid of this. First, the apprehending. And then we need to get rid of even this appearance. Both are possible, but it's not easy.
Again?
Yes?
Again, please?
Yes. So, when we say there's two aspects to unawareness, there's two aspects to it. One is passively everything appears, and one is actively we hold on to it. If we want to get rid of that, we need to get rid of both. We need to get rid of actively apprehending that which is impossible, and I'll explain what that means. And then we need to also get rid of the appearance of this. But first we get rid of actively apprehending this. So it's a bit like with the mirror image. First we understand that, this is impossible. And understand that this is just deceiving us. And that is already a great step. That's already really amazing. If we understand that the way our mind perceives phenomena, that this is mistaken, that it appears this way, but this is just an illusion, or like an illusion, then our lives will be drastically transformed already. But we can even get rid of this appearance of phenomena appearing in this impossible way. So first we get rid of this apprehension that phenomena really exist that way, actively kind of apprehending it that way. And then even we understand, oh, it's impossible, that's totally impossible. The appearance will still be there, and eventually we get rid of the appearance. I mean, this is, I'll talk more about this, but if you understand the difference between the two, there's already, it's a great step. But what? Pardon?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the difference. I understand the part of actively apprehending it.
Yeah.
Passively appearance, just because I apprehend it that way, what does it mean passively appear to me as in a wrong way? It's there. It's how I actively apprehend it.
Okay, let me give you an example of like a dream. Okay? When you dream, there appears to be, something happens in your dream. Let's say something horrible. So one way, the dream, it appears there very strongly. But while we dream, we think it's real. We think it's true. This is real, this is real. It's not just a dream. So likewise, you can train your mind in which the dream still appears, but you can start to think, this is not real. This is actually not real. Yeah? So this would be like getting rid of the active apprehension and not getting rid of the appearance.
I don't believe it.
You don't believe
I
it?
see, but
Ah, okay. All right. Well, this is to be seen. I mean, this is good because, of course, this is not something we have any experience right now. So this is what the Buddha claimed. It's one of those claims, and we need to see whether that's possible or not. But we can then also continue with the dream of the example of the dream. We can then totally stop the dream. Yeah. So if you want to stop the appearance, you can even stop that. But this is difficult to understand, especially right now, because all we know is dreaming. We have no experience. This is why this example of dreaming is used a lot. Right now we're like in a dream. And the Buddha is called the Buddha because it means awaken. The word Buddha means awakening. The English word bud, the bud of a flower, comes from that apparently. B-U-D, bud, right? Something that is to be awakened. Yeah. So the Buddha actually just means someone who's awakened from this sleep of thinking that the dreams are real and from dreaming altogether and actually now being awake. I'm not talking about the romanticized way of dreaming. It's like the confused way of dreaming. We're in a confused dream right now. Okay, but let's see whether, it makes sense that we can get rid of those different levels. But the point is ignorance. What is it that this mind either actively perceives or that which always appears to us? And there we need to really look at our own experience. So with whatever you hear here, it's so important when you learn about Dharma, when you hear about Dharma, not to look for something new and interesting. I mean, maybe some of what you hear is totally boring because you heard it so many times. Like when we're in Dharamsala, as long as the Dalai Lama gives teachings over and over, and oftentimes they're the same. But there's a way in which you listen. You listen in a way by taking it right back to your own life. And because you're not the same as you were yesterday, if you take it back to your own heart, because you were not the same as you were yesterday, the experience you get from what is Homeless Day, for example, is different, right? Because you're different. Okay? So, I mean, for some of you this may be new, but for those of you who heard about it, I would like to ask you, take it back to your own experience. Does this match with your own experience? Okay, so how does this ignorance work? It works in a way in which we have a sense that we think of body and mind. Okay, there's our body, there's our mind, but there's a sense that there's something more than just body and mind. That there is an actual solid self. Okay? So what is the self? I mean, actually no one says the self doesn't exist. No one says Shani doesn't exist. Am I pronouncing it right? Shani.
Yes.
Yeah. Not like Shaha. Now I can say Shaha. It took me a while to learn it. Okay, so now Shani. You know, if we think of Shani, who is Shani? We call Shani, we give the name, we have that sense of Shani by, you know, giving that name to the mind and the body. Right? That's what we impute, that's what we say Shani is. Right? The same is true for other objects, you know, like a forest. What's a forest? We call a forest something, we call something a forest, with lots of trees, we impute forest. If you look for the forest among the trees, no forest to be found. If you look for Shani, you know, take away a body, take away her mind, no Shani to be found. But this is not how it feels. If I think of myself, I think of my body, my mind, and of course myself saying so, my body, my mind, there seems to be something separate from my mind and body. Something separate. And there's different levels how this appears. Sometimes it appears very strongly, this separate thing, and sometimes less strong. So this is why this is so deceiving, because it have always appeared very, very strongly. It'd be very easy to identify it. But the tricky thing is, sometimes it appears very strongly, and at other times, hardly. And when I look for it, it totally goes. If such a separate self existed, when I look for it, I must be able to find it. It's like, you know, I lose something and I know it's kind of in that room. Like I know if the self is there, if Shani is there, I'm not going to look over there. I'm going to look over here because this is, you know, I know there's even a location for that self. It's with Shani's body and mind. This is how it feels. So if I have something in a room, I know in a specific place to look, if it's there, I'll find it, eventually. So if such a separate self exists, separate from mind and body, the more I look, closer I get to it, and the more clear it must appear to me. But we all know, well, some of us probably know, that this is not what's happening. When we start looking for it, it kind of keeps disappearing. Yeah. So first of all, when we usually asked to think of times when this self appeared very strongly. Right? Times of, well, the classic example is when we were embarrassed in front of lots of people. You know, everyone else has just told us that we're horrible and that no one ever liked us and that we're thieves and whatever. And it's not even true. We didn't steal anything, but still people accuse us of that. And we're now walking back to our room, right? And it's like there's an eye. They just said that about me. There's a very strong sense of something different from body and mind that now I feel very upset about it. You know, this was said to me. Or when everyone looks at me right now, you know, and people are accusing me, there's a very strong sense of a self. Okay? So don't focus on just the people just saying those things. Just focus on the sense of a self. So we've been in situations like that, all of us at different times. It came up very strongly. Or like when there's great fear. I need to protect myself. So it's not like I need to protect my mind and body. It's more like I need to protect myself. Or times when I got angry with myself, you know. My hair is really bad and my memory is really fading, and it's not like I'm getting angry with the mind, which is the memory, it's getting angry with myself, right? I'm getting upset about myself. So there seems to be something very strongly there. Yeah, so at different times, we need to just, I mean, right now, there's probably not much of a sense of a self, because you're just listening, you're forgetting about yourself. Just, you know, listening to someone else speaking. But so this is why right now, if you bring to mind a situation where the sense of an I was very strong, this is what's helpful to look at. So to look at that and see where is it located, first of all. Because there's a sense of location. I've asked people about this, and I thought everyone would give the same answer that I would give. But interestingly, there's so many different answers, right? Where do you feel yourself is located?
Now, as you said now, every time when I hear it, I have another. Why couldn't you say the mind is getting insulted or the mind is getting
Wait.
angry?
I can say that, but I'm not saying this is how it feels. You see, we talk about this, the mind and so forth. Yes, you know, to some degree, what is getting insulted, you know, it's what we do with it. It's not really our body that gets insulted, so that's all we're left with. So I talk about this. But the point is, you know, first of all, doesn't feel like, you know, they've hurt my feelings, we say. But my feeling implies there's someone else who owns those feelings. There's a very strong sense that, you know, and there's other times too, when we say, I walked somewhere. I just went there yesterday. Or I worked really hard. What worked hard was the body, or what walked was the body. But still it seems like I'm picking up myself at the same time and take myself somewhere, not just the body. So at first I just want to check, is it true that there's you know, sense of there's something separate. Let's just check at that. Yeah, at times. Something separate from mind and body. Okay? So that self, first of all, isn't that impossible? Yeah, that's kind of a course, it's not that subtle. I mean, some senses of a self, of course, especially when you have a sense of, I am permanent. Yeah, I'm always the same. I never change. Right? And there's a lot in Western society that actually enhances that sense of a self. Yeah, the sense of like something being there permanently. This idea of, for example, we sometimes say, you know, whatever happens, you know, whatever worry that arises, don't be affected by it. Don't let yourself be affected by whatever happens. Yeah, it seems it is possible to, you know, forget about your worry, forget about your mental state, forget about your physical state, but you stay cool. Yeah, so like in some commercials, no matter what happens, be cool, drink Coke or whatever. Yeah, so, you know, no matter what happens, it's almost like you could not be affected by mind and body and stay cool. Stay who you are. Yeah. Likewise, there's sayings such as, go and find yourself. Be true to yourself. Right? Again, no matter what happens, be true to yourself. Right? No matter what happens physically or mentally, you know, be true to yourself. There's other times when, you know, maybe a prostitute, you know, while she's, you know, while basically working, thinking, this person can't have me, only my body. Right? Can't have me, just my body. Or there's a sense that, today I'm feeling really crappy, I look really ugly and I feel really bad. That's just not me. It's just not me. Who is that? Who's that who feels, you know, crappy? And who's that looks kind of, you know, disheveled and, you know, all over the place? Who is it if not me? Right? In that moment, if that's not me. And I'm not saying react. What we actually mean is usually I'm not like that. That's not exactly. I mean, we may interpret it that way, but it really feels like I'm just not myself today. We have that, I'm just not myself today. Well, if that's not ourself, who is it? Right? As if there was a separate safe self from how we feel and how we look. Something separate. There's, of course, philosophical ideas, such as the notion of a soul. Again, it seems to be different from mind and body, some solid soul. Yeah? It's like, I grew up with this kind of like, it's heart-shaped and it's got wings. And when we die, it kind of goes out. I mean, that's not my mind, that's not my body. It's a heart-shaped kind of thing that leaves my body and mind when I die. Right? So it's reinforced by that too. Likewise, if we think of Freud's ideas, yeah, like a superego. I don't know, I think it's called the ID or it. That's like our instincts and impulses. And there's the ego, and there's a superego. Two egos. One ego, one superego. Right? So it's reinforced by that. And even though if you look closer at it, it's maybe much more a mind, that superego. But nevertheless, it's very much explained in a way as if there were two selves. Kind of one kind of tried to negotiate between the it and the ego, you know, between the two, the superego, or between the superego and the it, and you know, there's all. So all this has been enhancing this sense of a self. Yeah, our society, the way we grew up, the things people say, right? Yeah, it's been enhanced, and so there is a sense that every time something happens, there is some solid, there's some I here. So actually, whatever we do, there is a sense that phenomena exist objectively, inherently. So whatever object we take to mind, it appears in that way, and then oftentimes we actively apprehend it to be that way. So, especially when I think of, I'm just doing my thing. Sometimes I'm just doing my thing, and nothing really happens. I just, don't think of I and others and so forth. And something triggers I. Someone says something, whatever. And there's an I, but not just, I referring to mind and body. There seems to be right away something separate, something added. And then if I think of others, it's also not just others in relation to the I, totally relative. There seems to be some intrinsic otherness over there. An intrinsic me here and others there. And the stronger it gets, the more isolated I feel, disconnected. I here and the rest over there. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, whatever really there is, there's a body in mind, and on the basis of that I call it I. And there's other bodies in mind, on the basis of I call that in relation to myself, I call that others. But there seems to be something much more, some solid, concrete otherness, some concrete I-ness here. And then let's say I see something attractive. So there's already a sense I and others are very separate. So this I need to protect. Right? That's closest to myself. This I need to protect at all costs. So my happiness is a little more important than others. And then, let's say I meet someone very attractive. First, the person just appears, there's attractiveness, and it appears to be intrinsic, but it's just the appearance. But because of the appearance, I now perceive some inherent attractiveness. It's not me, nothing to do with me, inherently attractive. This person, it's almost like, how could you not see? You call up your best friend and you say, I just met that, incredible person. Like, look, he's just so wonderful. And she goes, nah. And you go, how could you not see it? Right? I mean, yeah, we do say, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder, but that's just up here. It's not how we feel about it. Yeah? So it's like, really, it seems to be intrinsically wonderful. Yeah, that person. And again, it's in relation to me, of course, only. In relation to me. So now I'm thinking I can get something from that. There's something I expect. So this intrinsic, wonderful, perfect person over there, it's blown up what was there. And I add a little bit. I add things, I mean, we know how we oftentimes, when our attachment is very strong, we see them as so wonderful. And then when things go badly wrong, and we see them again after 2 years, I'm thinking, what did I think was so great about that guy or woman? Right? We all have that experience. So it shows us we saw something in them that wasn't there. The same is true for anger. We meet someone, and there's something we negatively see about them. And also the negative is, we only see it as negative if it has to do with us. If they do something to some guy in South Africa, we don't care. We don't necessarily get angry. My best friend does something, we don't necessarily get angry. But if it's to do with me, then I get angry. So whether good or bad, it's always in relation to what they did to me. So I've already have a very strong separate sense of myself, right? And so then on top of that, and this is just the ignorance, it's not like who we are, not like right away we go, oh, I'm so, bad, we possibly do that, oh my God, I'm fully ignorant. No. There's other minds, beautiful minds, wisdom, there's all that. But there's this one mind that sometimes takes over. So then I see this person that, does something, and it's just a word sometimes. But the word I then see as negative. And there seems to be more than just a word and not just me calling it negative. Suddenly I see this bowl of negative coming with that person. And then I exaggerate a little bit. And then I see them as 100% negative and I hate them. Right? It's just projection of my mind. It's just a word they said. And I usually say that they could be our best friends. They've been our best friend for 20 years. And they say one sentence. And suddenly, everything changes. Our best friends, all the great stuff they've done, we don't think of that. They say that one sentence. And that one sentence is long gone. They've long said it. You can't even hear it anymore. The words are gone. but it's still there. And I blow it up and it becomes this negative thing there. And then, you know, it's totally exaggerated and anger arises and I want to do something, I want to harm them. I think about it the whole day, it's just sitting with them. And as the Dalai Lama says oftentimes, that scientists have come to know that 90% of what we perceive when anger arises is a total projection. Right? I mean, even scientists have got to see that, you know, it's like so difficult to really perceive anger in the object, but you know, if you really look, 90% or, you know, probably even more, is a total projection. So you see how the mind, this one mind, that kind of exaggerates, adds things all the time, leads us to have states of mind such as anger, attachment, and then other states, jealousy, arrogance, and so forth. It's always adding something to what actually exists. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is what this unawareness does. And at times it's more active than at others. But we're not in accordance with reality. This is not how phenomena actually exist. There is nothing so concrete out there, something solidly out there. It's impossible. It's impossible because otherwise I would have to exist separate from my mind and body. Yeah. So the question therefore, well, the question she had, well, how do we exist then? Well, that's of course the big question, because of course we do exist, just not in that way. So the question would be, is it our mind? Is our mind the self? But then we have so many different minds. Which one is the self? If we say the one that controls us, well, sometimes our anger controls us. Sometimes we'd have to say the anger, you know, the self is the anger. But sometimes our love controls us. So then it becomes the self, the love. So what is it? I mean, is there a separate controller? No, not necessary. You know, our mind works perfectly well without a separate controller, just as our body works perfectly well. We don't need a controller that tells us, breathe, don't stop breathing, right? Heartbeat, heartbeat. No, it's just doing its thing. Likewise with the mind, different minds arise, you know, they influence each other, and then there's, you know, different emotions, and sometimes one mind can watch another mind, right? But there's still a sense, there's one thing controlling it, and that one thing seems to be kind of permanent, or always the same. Yeah? But it's just different minds, and it's just an illusion. So if we say the mind, the self is the mind, well, that's also very difficult, first of all, because we have different levels of mind. We have very coarse mind, the mind right now that is active right now, and the coarser level of mind is the one that is very much dependent on the brain. Yeah? So if we're brain damaged, and we can only use the coarser level of mind, then the coarser level of mind is disrupted. But then we also have subtler levels of mind. There's a subtler level which right now we can't really use, we don't utilize. And it does arise at times when we sleep, when we faint, when we die. It arises. But we can't utilize it. We haven't learned to utilize it yet. So which level is the self? If we say it's the subtle level, right now there couldn't be any active self, because the subtle level right now is not active. We're just utilizing the coarse level. And then if it's this coarse level, then when we go to sleep, that is not active. It means we disappear, the self is gone when we sleep. Again, that's a problem. Yeah. So which mind do we say is the self? Is it all of them? Well, we end up with multiple selves. That's a problem. It's, you know, plural. I mean, there's many minds. Which one of them is the self? Yeah. And so the anger is the self. Again, the sense of my anger, that's not possible. My memory, that would be the memory sometimes would be the self. But I talk about my memory as if there's, I get angry with my memory. There's someone separate that would get angry with the memory when it doesn't work well. Yeah. So what is it? You know, what is it exactly? What is that self there for? If it's the mind, there's a problem. If it's the body, of course. I mean, sometimes we even think of our body as the self, somehow. You know, people who have a strong focus on the body, and, you know, whatever the reasons are, but when we, I mean, people who very much identify themselves with their bodies, who just, you know, all day long, Miss Israel or Miss, you know, America. I'm not trying to generalize here. I'm not saying every Miss Israel or Miss whatever, you know, Miss Tibet is doing that, but, you know, they spend a whole lot of time and they kind of, almost like, I am what I look, you know, the way I look. They're very much, you know, I don't look good today, I'm not good. I look well, I'm good. Kind of, you know, they very much identify themselves with the body. But ordinarily, we don't think so much of the self as being the body. So with the mind, we have that problem. Subtle mind, coarse mind. Which one is it? And we do have a sense it's the coarse mind oftentimes. We do have that sense. But again, that would, and you see, like there's these movies, I don't know whether you've seen those. This is more with people who are from the States, because they're very much familiar with this movie called Freaky Friday. It's a movie about a mother and a daughter that one day, through some Freaky Friday Chinese woman, whatever, fortune cookie, they suddenly swap bodies. And the mother has now, the mind of the mother is now with the daughter and vice versa. Yeah. Anyway, it's a funny movie. But that would mean that part of the, you see, because the coarse mind has swapped, but the coarse mind is very much dependent on the brain. So how could you have the brain of the mother, but the coarse mind of the daughter? Right? It's impossible, because otherwise pieces of the brain would have to switch too. Yeah? Because of course when you poke a needle in your brain, there's brain damage, which means mental damage, because the coarse level of mind that we're utilizing right now is affected by that. The subtle level isn't affected by that. However, the subtle level we can't use right now. So therefore, you know, a person who's a great meditator who has reached the subtle level, they can have brain damage but can still, you know, function. But of course that's very, very rare to actually, you know. But this is kind of the idea, that the subtler levels, they become manifest usually for us only when we sleep and only when we die. That's the subtle mind that arises. So again, this idea of Freaky Friday, is like kind of a sense it's almost possible, but it's only possible because we have a sense that either there's a separate self that just switches, right? Or there's actually the coarse mind that switches, and a piece of a brain must go too, actually, or the whole brain, actually. Anyway, so I hope this kind of gives us a bit of a clearer picture. Yeah? And oftentimes we use other objects, not so much the person, because we have the problem with the mind here. But there's other objects, such as, I like flowers actually. There's a flower there. So flowers, you know, we oftentimes attach to them, especially when they grow in our garden, in my garden, and I'm like more attached than if my neighbor has them. So I look at a flower, and there's certain properties that a flower has. A flower has smell, a flower has shape, color, tangibility, you know, the thorns, you can kind of touch the thorns. There's a taste. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to it. But doesn't it seem there's a flower, there's a separate flower that owns all those properties? Don't we have a sense that there's a flower that owns its shape, its taste, and all that? Well, where's that flower? Where's the flower that owns the shape, the taste, the color, you know, all about it? Is there a separate flower? So of course not. Whenever we look at the flower, I mean, even though it seems to be there's some separate flower, if we took it apart, we would never find a flower. If we took away its smell, its taste, everything, we wouldn't find a flower. But nevertheless, there's a sense there's something separate that owns those properties. And also, you see, if there was really some flower, some inherent flower over there, we would be able to touch just that. If there was something inherently there, we would be able to, you know, seize that. But whenever we look at a flower, we never look at anything that is the flower. When you look at my body, you don't look at anything that is my body. I mean, my hand is not my body. My front is not my body. I mean, there's more to my body. It's my back too, but you never see my back. When you see my front, you don't see my back. Right? If you see a flower, I mean, the front of the flower is not the flower. That's just the front of the flower. So you only see one part of it. Whatever you do, the table, right? The front of the table is not the table. It's just a part of it that is not the table. But when we say we see the table, we always see something that is not the table. My favorite example is Israel. Okay? Israel, or Tuval. We say we are in Tuval. Well, we're never in the entirety of the place. We're always in places that are not Tuval. This is a part of Tuval, but it's not Tuval itself. I'm in Israel right now. But Israel, I mean, if I say I've been in Israel, the places I've been to, there's so few. I can't say that's Israel. Israel is so much bigger. even though, you know, exactly how big it is, there's some dispute about it, but nevertheless, we have an idea of what Israel is.
Very small.
Very small, but nevertheless, when we say we're in Israel, I can very much say I've been in Israel, but I've not been in the entire country, right? I mean, the entire country doesn't just mean the surface, there's more underneath, and, you know, I definitely didn't dig my way around Israel, right? And so, I always, when I say I've been to Israel, I've always been somewhere which is actually just a part of Israel and not Israel. So whatever I do with any object, if it inherently existed, if there was some inherent Israel, I would have to be able to be in the entirety of Israel, not in a part which is not Israel. So whenever I do something, you know, whenever I point at something, I always point at the thing that is not it. Whenever I see something, I never see the entirety. I said with my body. I mean, you say you see me, but you don't see my mind, and you certainly don't see all parts of my body. So you see something that actually isn't me, but it's still okay to say you see me. And the same when I walk. When I say I walk, my legs walk, my mind doesn't, right? And so something that isn't actually me is walking, and I can still say I walk. Which means there is no real inherent I. There's certain parts on the basis of which I can impute person. I can impute I. There's certain parts on the basis of which I can impute Israel. There's no inherent Israel, and therefore it's all right. When I see some part, I can say I see Israel. Or when I'm in one part, I can say I am in Israel. There's nothing inherently over there. It's just, you know, that's the basis of imputation. On the basis of that, I can say Israel. But we still have a sense there's some Israelness over there. And I think a good example is money. Shekel, 100 shekel. Right? It's just a name given to this. It's just something we impute. But there still seems to be some 100 shekel smiling. Right? Especially when we find it unexpectedly. Woo! It's almost like there's some value from its own side there. It's just what we've given to it. That's what we impute. But it doesn't appear that way. It seems to be over there. Right? If you really think about it, it's just us imputing value to it. Us as a society. It's not just us deciding, oh, now and you can buy so and so much with 100 shekel. You know, it's like as a convention. So conventionally, 100 shekel exists. They are imputed on the basis of those parts. There's no separate shekel to be found. And the same is true with everything that happens. Yeah. We ourselves, the other person, we impute them to be great or bad or whatever. And then it seems to be there from its own side. And then when there's a problem that arises, again, as I said yesterday, oftentimes, what is a problem? A problem is what we call this when someone says, you're horrible. You're a horrible person. Or when someone, you know, there's something that we're very displeased about. All there is some words, us hearing those words and mentally thinking, oh, boo, right? And then we say problem. And suddenly what we call problem now becomes something really big there. Right? It's just us calling that, giving the name to these situations and calling, but suddenly it's something big there. And it sits in the back of our mind, you know, the whole day. Right? And we're upset about it or, you know, worried about it. Where in actuality, when we look at it, what is the problem we call problem? It's just a name given to a certain situation that's already changed. But the problem seems permanent. We've solidified it. We made it concrete. And we do this with everything. We do it with everything. We do it all the time. And that's why we suffer. Right? It's just action, reaction, action, reaction. And you know, we need to call things by name. It's okay, otherwise we won't be able to communicate. It's helpful. But we can never be 100% precise because there's really nothing ever inherent. We just use those terms to be able to communicate. But we make more out of it. So therefore, our misperception of reality, this misperception we have of reality, wait, let me just think, I need to take a break now, I think. Yeah, because we decided yesterday that we had half an hour less, and we added a little bit, so to make sure you get the full package. And so let's take a break of, how long should we say?
5 minutes?
10 minutes, yeah, just if there's too crowded on the toilet. So let's take a 10-minute break, take some rest. I'll see you again after 10 minutes.